Okay, thanks very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. This is the Corporate Parenting Board meeting on the 12th of November. And what I would like us to do, please, if we can, is to go around. Of course, everybody has a different picture on their screen, so it's hard to say in the order, and I probably, because there are quite a lot of us here, I may well not have everyone up on my screen. But if you could put your screens on so that we can see each other, keep your microphones off unless you're speaking, and that will help with the sound without any feedback. If we could introduce ourselves, and I'm going to start on my screen, and anyone I've missed out, please give me a shout. So if you could introduce yourselves, and unless you've got a wonderful balloon over your shoulder telling us who you're from, perhaps you would kind enough to tell us what organisation you're with, so that we're all familiar. To start with, most of you know I'm Councillor Kate Weller, and I'm the chair of this board. And I'm going to start next with Karen Elliott. Karen.
Hello, yes, good afternoon. Thank you. My name's Karen Elliott. I'm the head of Quality Assurance and Partnerships at Dorset Council.
Thank you. Lynn Giles.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Lynn Giles, Children's Services Manager, Action for Children.
Thank you. Louise Smith.
Hello, Louise Smith, new designate nurse for Looked After Children in Dorset CCG.
Thank you. Catherine Dillon. Catherine may not be with us now. She's our technical support though. Councillor Ryan Holloway.
Good afternoon, Councillor Ryan Holloway, Dorset Council Ward Member for Wareham.
Thank you. Kate Critchell has already introduced herself, I think, to all of you. She is our committee clerk for the day. Thank you for being with us, Kate. Councillor Richard Biggs.
Hi, Councillor Richard Biggs, Dorset Councillor representing Panbury Ward in Dorchester, the Vice Chair.
Thanks, Richard. Matthew, could you introduce yourself and tell us what your role is?
Hi, yes, thank you. My name's Matthew Chislett and I'm the Service Manager for Corporate Parenting and Permanence.
Thank you. Next on my screen is Teresa. Teresa, could you introduce yourself and give us your remit?
Thank you, Chair. Teresa Levy, Executive Director for Children in Dorset Council.
Thank you. I've now run out of screen here, so I may need some help. I've got Debbie Scriven. Are you there, Debbie? I haven't got you up on screen.
I am here. Good afternoon, Councillor, and thank you for inviting me to this meeting. My name's Debbie Scriven and I'm one of the Quaros within Dorset.
Thank you. Kate Shelley.
Hello, I'm Kate Shelley, Communications Lead for Children's Services at Dorset Council.
Thank you. Jane Somper, I think you're with us.
I am, thank you, Chairman. Ward member for Beacon and lead member for Children's Safeguarding, supporting Councillor Parry, who sent his apologies. He can't be here today. He's cabinet member for Children's Services.
Thank you. Jane Stewart.
Hello, my name's Jane Stewart and I'm known as the Quaro Manager and I manage the independent reviewing officers for Dorset Council.
Thank you, Jane. Maddie Lewis-Smith.
Good afternoon. Yeah, I'm Maddie Lewis-Smith and I work for Action for Children. I'm here as the service coordinator for the Independent Visitor Service.
Thank you, Maddie. Penny Ernie.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Penny Ernie. I'm the current designated nurse for Looked After Children and Care Leavers Pan Dorset for Dorset Clinical Commissioning Group, representing health.
Thank you very much. Who else have I got here, Matthew, that I need? Anne Haig.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anne Haig from Participation People. I'm a youth voice and insight officer working with the Dorset Care Leavers and the Care Leaver Forum.
Thank you. Andrew Kirby.
Thank you, Chair. Andrew Kirby, Winsbourne North Ward.
Thank you. Simon Fraser-Brown is not with us at the moment. Will be joining us shortly, I think.
This is Simon Fraser-Brown. I am here. I just can't get my screen on at the moment. I'm having to dial in via phone, but I should be with you shortly.
That's fine. Thanks very much, Simon. Louise Drury.
Good afternoon. My name's Louise Drury, and I'm here supporting quality assurance and also the Harbour Project.
Thank you very much indeed. And sorry, I'm scrolling through participants here very quickly. I'm very pleased we've got Jan and Martin Hill with us again. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, hi everybody. Yeah, Jan and Martin Hill, we're foster carers in Althington Mills, just outside of Weymouth.
Lovely, thank you very much, and thank you again for joining us. Have I captured everybody there? Is there anybody I've missed out on the list?
Yes, you've missed me out.
Who's me?
Stella Jones.
Oh, sorry, Stella. I can't see you on my list. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Stella Jones, councillor for Dorchester East, but I'm also the council champion for children and families.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
And good afternoon, Chair. It's Sarah Jane Smedmore here as well. I'm Corporate Director for Care and Protection, Dorset Council.
Right, thanks, Sarah Jane. Anybody else I've missed there?
Yes, good afternoon. Oh, we're all jumping in.
Right. One of you speak quickly.
Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Linscott. I'm Principal Teacher for Dorset Council.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And Miriam.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Miriam Lee, Principal Educational Psychologist for Dorset Council.
Thank you very much indeed. Have I got everybody now?
Just one more, I think, or a couple more. So, hi, I'm Lisa Reid, the Quality Assurance Lead in Dorset Children's Services.
Lovely, thank you. Nice to meet you. And anyone else now?
Me, Councillor Kathy Lugg, Burned Armour.
Oh, hello, Kathy. Right. Sorry.
Hi, Kate. Hi, everybody.
Right, now going through my list here, I think that's all of you. Thank you very much indeed. And welcome, Simon. We now have you on screen. Can I ask you, when you're speaking, if you put your cameras on, we can see you. It helps for us to be able to put a face to a voice. Otherwise, we're struggling a little bit sometimes. Not all of us know each other. Can I also ask you, if you want to speak, can you use the chat bar and just put RTS, which means right to speak, and I will keep an eye on that as far as I possibly can to see who wants to speak. It's easier, particularly when there are so many, because I haven't got your pictures all up on the screen, and I can't see if you're putting a hands up on your screen, but I can see the right to speak in the chat bar. Okay. Right, and if I'm looking away, it's because I'm looking at another screen to see the agenda. Okay. Apologies for absence, Matt, please. We know Councillor Parry will be with us.
Sure, thank you, Councillor Weller. We have 4 apologies today. Elaine Okopsky from Dorset Parent Carer Council, Antonia Dixie, Participation People, Councillor Andrew Parry, and Liz Plausto from Dorset CCG.
Right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's minutes. Have you all managed to, you've all received your minutes, have you all managed to read your minutes? Unless I see anything in the chat bar that somebody wants to make any comments on that, I'm going to take it that you're all happy with those minutes, and at such time as I'm able, I will sign them. Can't see anything there, so can I assume that you're all happy with that? Looks as though you all are. Right, declarations of interest, please. Nothing in the chat bar, so again, I'm going to assume that there are no declarations of interest. And we'll go on to item number 4, which is public participation. Matt, or Kate Critchell, have we heard from anybody who wanted?
There's no public participation today.
No, right, lovely, thank you. Right, so we're on to item 5, which is the Independent Reviewing Officer Annual Report. And Debbie, that's you, I think.
That will be me, Councillor Weller, Karen Elliott.
Right, yeah, I was just looking to see that, and it says Karen Elliott there, although I've got Debbie Scriven on my crib sheet, so I've obviously made a mistake on that. I apologise.
Could I just do a brief intro, if I might, please, Chair?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Teresa, would you like to speak first, and then we'll come back to you, Karen, for your report. Thank you. Teresa, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Councillor Weller. So we've got the opportunity today to both hear from our quality assurance managers around the very important service that is the Independent Reviewing Officer service, which broadly holds the local authority to account on a case-by-case basis for their children and have close relationships with our children who are looked after. So a really important service and essential to have this annual review, annual report rather, every year. But we've also asked, and Debbie's joining us, for one of our independent reviewing officers to come to board to be able to answer any questions, considerations you have around how it is for our independent reviewing officers to deliver that important role. So first of all, the annual review, and then a conversation with Debbie and others about how well that role is working at the present time.
Thank you very much. Right, Karen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I said earlier, my name is Karen Elliott and I'm the Head of Quality Assurance and Partnerships in Dorset Council. And I'm going to present the Independent Reviewing Officer's Annual Report, which we refer to as the IRO report. Jane Stewart, in fact, was the author of the report, and she is an interim Quality Assurance Manager covering a temporary vacancy, but she only started in the post on the 12th of October this year, so she is very new to the organisation. The report gives an overview of the context of the service and identifies where the service is performing well and where the service can be strengthened. The responsibilities of the IRO service, as many of you will know, is set out in the updated IRO handbook. And this change in 2011, it changed the responsibility of the IRO of that of purely management of the review process to having a much wider focus on the overview of the child or young person in care by monitoring and scrutinising on an ongoing basis, which is what Teresa was talking about in terms of holding the local authority to account. This includes ensuring that children's wishes and feelings are heard and given due consideration, and that is what Debbie Scriven is going to talk a little bit about following this. So she'll be able to talk about how she engages with children to hear their views. You will already know, I'm sure, that the ROs are independent in terms of not being managed by someone who has line management responsibility for the allocated social workers. And during this reporting year, that was managed within Safeguarding and Standards, which is now the new Quality Assurance and Partnership Service. Our IROs are qualified and very experienced social workers, and they've worked with children and young people and families as social workers and often managers for a considerable number of years. As of March 2020, we had 6.2 full-time equivalents, and the workforce had been very stable, which is a really positive thing. You will already have the information on the profile of children in your data pack, so I won't dwell on this, although I did include some of it in my report. But on the 31st of March 2020, we had 474 children in care, and that we'd seen a steady increase over that year. We sometimes saw children coming into care at points of crisis where perhaps earlier intervention may have prevented them coming into our care. And this increase meant that social workers supported high numbers of children in care. And our quality assurance audits identified areas to strengthen, such as drift and delay in permanence planning. Our IRO and management oversight didn't always provide the level of scrutiny in relation to this, particularly for children in care on Section 20 and those that have been placed at home on care orders. The IRO is fundamental in supporting practice and being part of a wraparound for the social work team and managers to offer challenge and to problem solve together. We know that the IRO footprint needs strengthening, and there is a need for them to have a strong focus on these areas in relation to strengthening permanence planning. Within the reporting period, the IROs completed 1,241 reviews, and of these 95% took place on time, which was an improvement this year. Timeliness of minutes did improve, but we know that there is some way to go in relation to that, and that there will be a strong focus to ensure timeliness is achieved and maintained. The IRO service measures quality of care plans, and on page 12 of my report, you'll see the judgments. And although there's been a slight reduction in good and outstanding combined this year, there is an increase in outstanding from previous years. Page 13 details the themes identified in our collaborative and moderated monthly audits. It details good practice and areas where we need to strengthen, such as consistent quality of care planning. To support practice improvement, we have our escalation and tracking system in place, and we always try to resolve issues informally where we can. But where necessary, there is a formal escalation process to follow. This is an area that we need to strengthen, and further work has been taking place in relation to this. And I know that in the last 6 weeks, we've had more escalations than the whole of the last year, which is good. And so an escalation doesn't necessarily mean that that's a bad thing. It means that we are supporting the service and scrutinising care planning to elicit change and improve outcomes for children. In relation to attendance at reviews, all children over the age of 4 are invited to engage in their review, and this is supported by an advocate. I won't talk any more about our advocacy service because I know that Lynn is here to give you a report on that. The user satisfaction survey, which I've included, there's a couple of graphs on there. It does say that, and the reason why I've included that is because it details the view of the IRO from children and young people. It says that 20% didn't know what an IRO was, and so we definitely need to strengthen that. And it says only 30% thought their IRO was kind. But in terms of having a little caveat around that, is that although the young people would have been asked to tick multiple boxes, they may have been drawn to what was the most important thing at the time. So they're not necessarily mutually exclusive in terms of what they've chosen. There is a chart there on care plans as well, and we know that this is an area to strengthen, and the IROs can really support the service with this. There's also a question about are you happy and feeling are you happy? I'm not sure if you asked all children whether they were happy at that time, whether this everybody would say yes. So we need to get underneath what this is telling us and make sure that we're talking to our young people to understand them, and that's what the IRO does, exactly that. So in relation to progress on the work plan, you'll see that on my report. And if I could just focus a little bit on the forward plan. So securing permanence, I know that what we're talking about in terms of going forward, there is now a permanence panel in place, and the IRO is invited to that to provide good scrutiny and challenge to our social workers and managers to try and avoid drift and delay. In relation to IRO practice standards, we will be developing that in relation to how we actually do this in Dorset. One-page profiles will be produced by the IROs to make sure that our young people and children have those in their hand before they meet their IRO, so that they can see what they look like, what they like, how they, what may be of interest to them, so that they feel as though perhaps they're not meeting a stranger. In relation to escalation, I've already talked about that. The service will also identify case examples on a regular basis to consider and understand the journey of the child, so we can understand how we, the IROs, can impact on outcomes for children. The service will also support operational colleagues in ensuring the family group conference offer is brought forward into the child's journey with us, so that we can have explored properly all options in relation to returning home to their parents or other family, and also in the relation to who can supervise family time for the child and their family. The practice framework work has already started on this, in fact, and we're developing a person-centred approach to children in care reviews, and our principal educational psychologist, who's here today with us, Miriam, and the principal social worker, Jack Corrigan, is supporting with this. We have listened to what our young people have said, and that we will involve young people in recruitment of our IOs going forward. Going forward, our IROs have been combined into our child protection service, so we will be referring to them as quality assurance reviewing officers. And the reason why we've done that is to reduce the handovers for children. So children only have to tell their story once. They will have met the child protection chair already, often, and then often children then come into our care, so they won't have to see another person chairing their children in care reviews. They'll already be familiar with that individual and will only have to tell their story once. We know that children, young people talk about the many changes of workers that they have, and very often that all the difficult people in their, all the trying to get to know all the different people in their lives. We will track and monitor progress on these recommendations identified, so that we can report into our quality and action meeting to see what else we need to be doing. I'm happy to take any questions if you'd like, and following that, Debbie Scriven, our IRO, will talk to you a little bit about how they ascertain children's views and bring that to life in the review.
All right, thank you very much, Karen. I think it would be a good idea to ask questions from you first and then address any questions to Debbie afterwards, because that was quite a long report, and thank you very much for it. It was very comprehensive. The first one I've got on the list is Councillor Richard Biggs. Richard.
Thank you, Chair. I always look forward to the IRO report because I think it's one of the most detailed reports. We can get an awful lot of information. I suppose a number of comments, a number of questions, really. I suppose one thing is we always seem to get a really long delay between getting the report. You know, we're supposed to be scrutinising, not an audit committee looking back. We want to know where we are now, and so we're having to look at other information within reports to see that actually, you know, the numbers have changed. They've gone up in number of looked after children. We've doubled the number in unregistered placements, things like that. So it is out of sync. So I don't know if we can next year try and get it earlier. You know, so there's a sort of 3-4 month delay, not sort of 8 months in this case. Well, it's so far back. You know, I looked at the previous report, which is always a good thing to do a sort of comparison, and of course we're a different director, a different IRO. You know, so many people have changed since then. So many people have done. So the first question was looking back at the previous report. There was a recommendation that there was an IRO in the Midlands. Did that actually happen? Because I don't recall. So that's the first question.
No, we didn't pursue that, and we wanted to try and bring our children back to Dorset where we can, and have our children looked after in Dorset. But no, we didn't pursue that in the end.
Okay. There's a number of comments. I think where it was 3.11, where it refers to one of the positives was that there was smart plans, and then it said one of the things that needed to be done was smart plans, which seemed to be contradictory. I guess what you're saying is that some were smart and very good, but some weren't.
Exactly. So it's inconsistent, is what we're saying, really.
Okay, thank you. The other thing was, I was a bit surprised that it said 8% of the children in care are BME, and that represented the school age. I was a bit surprised that is that high, because looking at the Dorset, it's around about 4-something%. But obviously that is correct, is it?
That as I understand it, yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, the school population is much higher, Councillor Biggs, than the general population.
Thank you. So I suppose getting to the only bit perhaps I'm going to be a little negative, bit critical. Just hear me out. Is and I suppose it's perhaps because I'm used to the previous IRO reports. You know, I think it's really important that independence is there, and that there isn't a need necessarily to defend the authority. You don't need to find the money or explain why we're in a situation where we can't do something. So I'm thinking on 2.18, the bit about unregistered placements. It doesn't really, you know, one of those cases, you know, is 2 years old. It doesn't say that. The previous report did, and it's gone to sort of great lengths to sort of defend the situation. I think we know the situation, which is, you know, the same as most authorities up and down the country are facing that. But I've almost thought, well, that's not your job, perhaps. You know, what are we going to do? You know, as councillors, I'm just feeling, yes, we know that, and in fact, later on we find it's got worse. You know, what have we got to do about that? And then I suppose that's the question for councillors: what's our lines of inquiry to try and deal with that? And it's very timely that the Children's Commissioner has produced a report during this week, isn't it?
Yes.
Stating that, you know, the market is basically the private sector have taken over the market. They can charge what they like. You know, they're averaging 17% levels profit and still undercut the, you know. So if we knew 2 years ago, you know, we could have set up a number of homes. You know, I think that's the challenge. I know we're doing one, but I think we're probably going to have to build another home at least. But I know that's not your point. I just wondered what your view is and how whether you change that slightly next year.
Well, I think Teresa wanted to come in there, but do you want to go, Teresa?
I will, and then I think actually the Councillor Biggs's point about it's not for the independent reviewing officer report to defend it is really helpful. So I think from an independent reviewing officer point of view, it would be helpful for you to pick up that bit. I just wanted to, well, thank you, first of all, Richard, for having such a clear and clarion bell understanding around the issue about, you know, the placement market, and it is such a challenge to us. The only thing I would say is that actually the situation hasn't got worse for us in Dorset. It's just that we've been very much more loudly communicating about how many placements we have in unregistered, but actually it was double or triple the level that we have now 2+ years ago.
Yes.
And so I think I just want to kind of really be on record around, we have been genuinely and generally diminishing the number of those, and for the 4 that we presently have, 3 of those 4 we are converting into registered provision. So if in effect, if you like, building 3 more homes. And one of those applications is already in, and for the other 2, an application is being made by a partner organisation that we're supporting in doing that. And the only other fourth individual placement is right and properly planning to come back to Dorset as part of that care plan. So I think the purpose of the element that's in the Independent Reviewing Officer report is to assure colleagues that in addition to the Independent Reviewing Officer, there are other Reg 44 visits going on to that provision, even though obviously being unregistered, you wouldn't normally do that. But other senior managers within the authority visit those provision, including myself, to assure ourselves in addition to the Independent Reviewing Officer visits. So in fact, they get more than our children in registered provision. And that's our positive intention. But absolutely agree with you about it's not for the Independent Reviewing Officers to defend that. I think myself and all of my staff feel so deeply frustrated by finding ourselves where we are. I think we all feel but there is a very clear strategy around how we're going to change that position. Karen.
Okay. Just one more question, if I may, which is around the graphs, the surveys that you did with the young people. So 5.15. I know it's difficult when you ask a question. You know, it's very much dependent on what the mood they're in at the moment, and children can say all sorts of things. I suppose it is, you know, as a corporate parent, I find it quite worrying that looking at the graph on the other screen, you know, do you feel safe and supported? Previously it was 87, now it's 50%, which to me that's a bit depressing, isn't it? You know, so what can we do about that? Is that just it was on the day, or what?
Well, it's interesting actually, because on Tuesday evening I raised that very issue. Anne Hay is here today with the young people and mentioned this, and I spoke to some care leavers about that to try and get underneath that. And their comment was around thinking that must be more around where the housing provision is offered to them in terms of the neighbourhood and the environment, sometimes not necessarily that they're feeling unhappy within a foster placement, for example. But we do need to understand that, and that's what I said earlier. We just need to understand that and get have more of an understanding of what that means for young people. With the IROs, they need to be making sure that they have those conversations with our children, young people in care, so that they can fully understand whether they are feeling happy and safe, supported. But yes, I agree. It is worrying, sad to see that.
Finally, I suppose if we could have an update at our next formal meeting, just to say you've explored that, and perhaps so we can understand whether there's anything that needs to be done or we're not doing, or you know, that would be really useful, I think. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Richard. Thank you for that, Karen. I've got Councillor Jones and then Councillor Cathy Lugg, please.
Yes, I think first of all, you said something so important at the beginning of your speech. You said the early intervention would have prevented some of these people going into care. And I think this is where we've got to concentrate. We are concentrating on the early years, but we've also got to concentrate on getting into the families as a whole very early. And hopefully more funds can be put towards that than we've had in the past. Moving on, can I ask about the long-term permanence plans? How often are they reviewed once they've been set in? How often do we review them for the young people?
We should be reviewing them at every child in care review in terms of permanency planning, and we now have a new permanency planning tracking meeting where we can identify when plans are drifting, but we should be reviewing them constantly, really.
Yes, yeah. And do they often change greatly?
Yes, sometimes they do.
So they do need to be looked at regularly, don't they?
Yes, they do, absolutely.
And something else, you said the minutes of reviews are taking too long to be forwarded on. Is this going to be sorted? Because if you go to a review, you want to know quite quickly what's happening.
Yes, absolutely, and there is a very strong focus on that, and certainly the new QA managers that are now in place are focusing on that to improve that. Yes. There has been an improvement since then, and we should see a continued improvement on that. And I would agree absolutely that it's really important that those young people have their letters straight away after their children in care reviews.
And it's so quick to do it these days online.
It is.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Stella. Councillor Luck?
Hello, everybody. It sounds like we're going in the right direction. As a former foster carer, I know how important it is to have the right independent reviewing officer. I was interested in the fact that we have a lot more children in care than our neighbouring counties. Have we drilled down, and is there any particular reason, following on from what Stella said about early intervention, is there something more we should be doing in that area?
I think Teresa wanted to comment on that, be better placed.
Yeah, it's fine, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Lugg. So the story for Dorset is a really concerning one in terms of why we have so many more children in our care than other people like us. But we do, in probably 100 more. And that is, as you absolutely rightly say, putting significant pressure on the system. Partly it's a lack historically of significant enough early intervention. And we know that when we look at our children's case pathways, we can see that. It's fairly well evidenced that actually things were left too long and there wasn't a tight enough intervention. So it may have been that people were working with the family, but it wasn't done in a really tight way. We also know, however, that long before this year and COVID, we were seeing too many children drifting. We didn't have permanency gripped. So that issue around taking it from when I took up in January, we only had 22% of our children with a permanency plan. We're now up at 89.8, so almost tipping into the 90%, which is where we want to be. So we haven't had permanency gripped, and what that means is that children don't leave our care in a timely way. So this isn't so much now about children coming into our care, because actually those figures are very tightly held. They're right where they should be, and they're coming in the right ways. They're coming in through the right proceedings or the right processes. But it's actually about children departing our care, children going into a permanent family or going into a permanent arrangement. And so we know that work is work for us to do. That does mean we have a significant number of children who we remain optimistic we can place for adoption in the coming year, but there's a significant work plan there. And it does mean we also have a number of children who have been in long-term care with their foster carers, who we want to have a conversation with them about what might be the permanency option for those children. So that work is underway. It's really important that we watch carefully that it's the right change that's going on, because what that means is that actually our children, by far the greatest number of our children, have been in our care for at least a year, and over 50% of them for more than 5 years. So those children, they really are our children, and they really are settled often where they are. So we're cautious about talking about moving children from placements, and much more interested in thinking about, can we secure permanency for them in that placement or in another place.
Thank you. Thank you. You're on mute, Kathy.
Sorry. We also have some extremely large families where every child in that family is in care, don't we?
We do, Kathy.
Do we have any sort of special intervention measures for extra large families, or is it worth us developing something to stop these large families coming into care?
Yeah, well, so listen, we could talk about this all day. As one of 9, I have a passionate experience of how it is to be part of a large family, and feel quite strongly that actually it's complex work that we don't always get right. It's very easy to become one of the pack, where people don't see the individual child when you get into those numbers of more than 2 or 3. But it does require us to think differently. Of course, just by the nature of having a large family, the pressure in that family increases. I mean, so does the strength, in my experience, in many families, because actually you get all that lovely richness of experiences too. But in these times of great pressure, particularly financial, we know that can be a significant challenge. So we work with all of our families at this point. I was just having a conversation with my extended leadership team this morning. It's about working with managing risk. The reality is, if we want children to stay in their families, we will manage risk in their families, and so we need to do that. And yeah, the more children there are, the more risks potentially there are, and the more complex that is. But I think we've got a good understanding of working on that on a strengths-based approach as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just ask there then, or following on from what Kathy said, are we hoping that we'll have some special and extra provision for these larger families, because undoubtedly they do require a different sort of support than a family of 2 or 3?
We have a range of ambitious possibilities if we get to that point. So if we got to the point where we had carers who could accommodate more children than they were approved for as a part of a sibling group, we could look at all sorts of building potential issues with them. The reality is when it's right and proper that large families come into care, there is often a great deal of trauma in that space, and it's not always right even to try and keep all of those children together. Sometimes it is the right thing. So we have an assessment called a together and apart assessment, where we should be asking ourselves the question around, is it right that these children all stay together, or are there a range of combinations where children should be placed? And then we have what is a very complex set of arrangements of contact. Yes. And I'm very struck by a family. I think, Chair, that you and I have had a conversation about where lots of complex contact arrangements, but actually I can see that those children, although split over a range of family households, are keeping in contact with each other, and that's really positive to see, because we really value those siblings relationships. They're incredibly important.
Right, thank you very much. I've got Andrew Kirby, Councillor Kirby, and then I'd like to move on to Debbie, if I may. Okay, Andrew.
Hi, thanks, Chair. It's just a quick one from me. I think what's really lovely about this document is that it has a wish list, and at 3.12 we do have a wish list, and I think our challenge as corporate parents is how do we ensure that the wish list is implemented? We've got a list of weaknesses there. How do we act on them? And I think the only person I can see on my screen is Teresa. Sorry, Service Director. I think, yeah, how are we going to ensure that those are going to be acted on, really? I think it's my challenge.
I think that's really helpful, Councillor Kirby. And all of those activities and actions are within our Strengthening Services Plan. So we can absolutely report on that on the basis that's a partnership plan that meets monthly, chaired by Matt Prosser. Really strong rigour around the actions being undertaken and delivered there. And that kind of covers the whole of these strengthening services for the whole of the children's services, not just looked after children, but that's where that's happening. So consider it already captured and in that action plan, absolutely, and reported on monthly. But we bring an excerpt from the strengthening services plan, I think, with the performance data set for Corporate Parenting Board.
Thank you.
Well, I'll be happy with that. Thank you, Corporate Director.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. I'm mindful that I've been very remiss in my timing here. So if we could bring Debbie in now, that would be useful. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Councillor. Well, I was asked this afternoon just to join you in my role as an IRO and explain some of the ways I've managed to capture children's voices, children and young people's voices, actually, particularly over this last period of COVID time, which has been very interesting, to say the very least. And I just wanted to start off by saying that every child has something to say. I see it as part of my job to enable them to be able to say that. And during this COVID time, I've had some real fun and games and had some great times. And for those that use Teams will understand that we can change the backgrounds. And working alongside some young people, they've had great fun using the backgrounds that we've got available to us. You know, we've had reviews where the young person and I have both been on Mars. Sometimes we've been into Minecraft. Sometimes we've been strolling along a beach, just because of the backgrounds that we've been able to use. And another thing they found particularly useful is the mute button. And for them, to be enabled to actually mute somebody on their screen, they have taken great fun out of, and it's been a great pleasure to be able to hold their hand and part of that journey. And I've had the pleasure of being able to do that because some of the reviews that I've done, we've had to think, different ways, because we've not always been able to go into residential placements or foster placements. So sometimes I've sat in a garage with a young person in a very small group of us. Sometimes we sat out in the garden, you know, during the nicer summer months. Sometimes I've been able to go into a residential setting, and myself and the young person or the child have sat together with my laptop, and we've used Teams, and then we invite everybody else into it. So we've sat alongside, and that's been a great experience, because that's when we worked through the magic of Teams and what enables this child to be able to use and what they can do. One of the bits and pieces that I used initially at COVID, which was a bit silly, but it really worked and engaged young people. I would start off a conversation with them maybe on Skype, and they would maybe only see half of my head or the lower part of my head. And particularly for the young ones, it was a great game of them telling me to go left or right or up or down. And it was just a way of engaging them and actually bringing them into the conversation. And by doing that with them, I found that you can capture the child's voice just by listening and watching and observing and hearing and reflecting back to them. And I've had some very, very special moments. So tough moments is time for some of them, because for other young people, these format has not worked well at all, and it's been very, very difficult. But for others, I must say I've had some great fun and games. And when I talk about games, one things that I did with a younger child who was struggling a little bit with this format and sort of seeing herself on screen and me on screen. So we used to play a game that each of us was think of an object, and it had to be something very simple. It might be a pen or a red pen or a piece of paper or anything else, and we used to disappear from our screens, and the first one back was the winner. And it really opened things up with this young person, and it just gave us that opportunity to be lighthearted and to giggle, and by building that relationship up, I hopefully then enable that friendship and that relationship to be able to capture their voices. And that's the next part of my work. And of course, that goes hand in hand. I know Action for Children, our colleagues are here with us today, and we use advocacy a great deal. But it's important for me to capture a child's voice and to hear it and listen to it, and to use a variety of skills to be able to do that. And I think an example that I'd like to use is a very hard to reach young person that I've been involved with, where for a long time I all of a sudden realized that he had a love of scooting and skateboarding. I personally have a love of bikes. You can't see them behind me, but they sit behind me in this room, and it just enabled us to have a way in. And all of a sudden I had this young man attending his child in care reviews, something he'd never done before. In fact, one that he couldn't attend because he wanted to do something within his education. He asked if I would go round to the home and see him afterwards, and I did. And it's just, in many ways, I feel very privileged to be able to do that, and it's great. So it's just ways of capturing people's and children's views and getting to know them a bit better.
Thank you very much, Debbie. That's absolutely terrific. And can I congratulate you, because it sounds as though you've made an enormous difference to those young people, particularly over the last few months, which has been very difficult, particularly difficult for our looked after children. It's been difficult for all children, I believe, but particularly for them. So that's great. You, I think, are ideally situated. When we were looking at the questionnaire, and Councillor Biggs brought up something about one of the questions that was asked, and I think sometimes it's the question we ask, you know, when we're not getting the answer that we want, it's because we haven't asked the right question. So that's something we may need to look at some point, that we're not quite asking the right question, and then we wonder why we've got this particular answer.
Absolutely. And I really believe that I don't just ideally go and see a child at a review time. I try to see them in between reviews. I have lists that I keep in my diary. I'm a great believer in sticky notes. I have lists in my diary that I try to phone these children on a regular basis. More so the young people that are in supported lodgings or independent lodgings, particularly at this time of the year, this period that we're going through currently, because those are often the ones that are estranged from family, so they don't have as much support around them. They often have great personal advisors and social workers in their life, and many other people. But it's just checking in with them. It's just that it's just that phone call. You all right? And sometimes you'll get a grunt. Sometimes you'll get a whole wealth of information that's really, really good. And I personally learn so much from the young people that I work with as well, which is positive.
Terrific, thank you. I've got Jan and Martin Hill want to come in. Jan?
Hello, thank you, Councillor Well. I just wanted to say something about Debbie. I've had the privilege of working with her on 2 occasions with 2 of the children that we've had, and I can actually say her methods, as she's just described, to those, particularly one teenager that we had who would not engage, Debbie used all kinds of ways to get her to engage, and she did. And she's an absolute pleasure to work with. And she actually does, she is sort of outstanding from others that we have had. And it makes the foster carer's life so much easier if that happens. So I thought credit where credit was due there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's good to know from the horse's mouth, as it were. Thank you. Does anybody else have anything to ask Debbie? Because if not, as I say, I am very mindful that we're behind time, and I'd like to move on to the next agenda item, if that's all right with everyone. I've got nobody else up there asking to speak, so we'll move on. Debbie, thank you very much for that contribution. That was terrific. And Karen, thank you for the report. Great. We'll move on to item 6, which is Matthew, financial arrangements for children in care and care leavers. Matthew and Simon.
Thank you very much, Councillor Weller. Just before I get started, I'll do the first half and then I'll hand over to Simon with your permission, if that's okay. Just to get started then, I know that it's in the paperwork. The policy for our children in care is that absolutely we're committed to setting up savings accounts and for them to receive pocket money. The difficulties that we have, though, is the amounts are so varied. They're agreed through the social worker of the child and also the fostering social worker. And that in itself leads to inconsistencies that we need to, as a service, look at and address. We also have some issues in terms of how we're recording the amounts and how that money is then being used for the young person. So, for example, if a child or young person were to put their savings towards a car or an insurance for their car or a laptop for college, for example, we're not tracking that robustly at the moment, and I think overall we really need to look at it. In terms of our fostering fees and allowances within the policy, we have an expectation that obviously our foster carers provide pocket money, but again, the amounts are not set. And in terms of whether that's specifically put in for a savings account is vague, and we need to really look at how we tighten up on that. And that's specifically for our in-house foster carers. When we look at our independent fostering agencies or AFAs, we do have in there that there's an expectation for pocket money and savings, but again the amount is again set up between the fostering social worker and the social worker. So again, consistency in that and how we then log it moving forward. Another part of our children in care financial offer is the Share Foundation or Share Fund. You may have heard of it. In terms of that, over the years they've helped over 125,000 young people set up ASAs or child savings accounts. They've been hugely successful, and I've recently have had the privilege of taking over as the lead person for the council for this. So there are some benefits. The children receive annual financial update statements. They're also encouraged to make additional contributions to build up to when they turn 18 and can take control of their account fully. They are also able to, at 16, choose where the money is moved within ASAs. And so over the course of a child being in care can build up to quite a significant sum of money when they leave. So it's so important we get that right. Alongside that, they're also able to offer support around budgeting to the young person in terms of guidance and advice, and that also comes through in the annual statements from them. As a whole, the idea is to help young people and support young people to develop their budgeting as they move into adulthood. I have just pulled some figures together. As of this month, the Child Trust Fund, the Share Fund, has a value of £192,936. So it's a significant amount of money. And what we need to get better at is looking at how we can contribute to them for our young people on an ongoing basis and develop our policies around that. That is all I had to say. I'm trying to bring us back in time as well. Do we have any questions?
I've got Councillor Kathy Lugg and then Councillor Ryan Holloway. Kathy?
Yeah, sorry, it's me again. When you foster for an agency, you just assume that everybody does it like that. And I was really shocked to hear that Dorset doesn't have set levels of savings. When we started to foster, we were given a chart and we were told how much you had to save per week for a child and what age they were, how much they would have after a year, how much they would have to after 2 years. And the social worker used to check that this had been done. And there was also guidelines for spends, but obviously that was in conjunction with the social worker, depending on what that child was likely to spend the money on. But I was really shocked that Dorset doesn't have that. And what strikes me about this is how unfair it is. If some foster parents are saving for the children and other foster parents aren't saving anything, and that child then talks to another foster child when they're 18 and says, oh, I just had, £5,000 given to me and spends. And that child then says to its foster parents, well, where's my money? We need to have some sort of system, at least for savings. I understand it's different for spending money, but I think, every child who's been in care deserves to have some money at 18 saved for them. And I don't see why we can't set an amount for a child. I'm sure Martin and Jan, I can see them nodding, agree with that. One of our foster daughters, when she left at 18, spent that money on things for a new flat that we'd saved for her. And that's how it should be.
Thank you, Kathy. Councillor Holloway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, actually just sort of almost picking up a little bit on what Kathy said, particularly with sort of savings, Matthew, obviously, is that, it is really important that obviously our young people are sort of encouraged to save at that age, because obviously it's going to help them for the future and everything. But I think maybe one of the things that I don't know if we do this as an organisation, particularly to maybe help some of the foster carers, is there like anyone that as an organisation do we recommend to people to take maybe independent financial advice, particularly for the foster carers, to maybe help with because obviously, as we know, we're in a sort of time where interest rates are extremely low on savings, and often the savers are often get hit incredibly hard, and of course children's savings also do get hit. So I'm just sort of curious as maybe, could we sort of as an organisation try and get them sort of like help or guidance to try and help that money that they save go further, because that's one of the big challenges in our sort of like current economic climate that we've got. And I think that might be a sort of a good idea, I think, that of helping moving forward. And like I said, it would be, I think it would give more of our young people more of the incentive to save, particularly when they reach the age of 18, that they've got then the money then to move to either further education or to obviously put down for a flat or a property. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Kirby.
Hi, thank you, Chair. I'm really lucky that I met a child that's formerly in care, so a care leaver, probably about a year ago, and we met up for a cup of tea, and she said to me that her biggest bugbear, and this really surprised me, was actually the allowance that she was given and that her friends were given. And she said that it was far too much, and I was like, oh, how's, surely, it's really lovely to have a good chunk of money coming through. And she said, no, it's quite the opposite. She said that first of all, that quite a few of her friends spent it on things that they shouldn't be spending it on, and there are quite a few of them were quite vulnerable as well, and they spent it on, in her words, she said that some of them spent it on drugs, so I think it's quite, and also she said that of course there's that not having that understanding of being able to save money and actually earn money, and she said one of the big areas that her sort of friends that weren't in care were able to do they were able to work and have jobs, so they were able to have many jobs, so they were able to understand the world of work at an earlier stage. So I think for me, I think from my conversation with her, I thought, are our young people allowed to work when they're in care, and is there any way we could facilitate that a bit more? And the second one is, I think I agree with her. I think that if there is this inconsistency, I think the last thing we need is a large chunks of money going over to vulnerable people where they might not be spending things that they should be spent on. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. Right, I've got Sarah Jane. You wanted to speak?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Just to really just follow on from what Matthew's just described around the work that we're doing within fostering. So really positive that we know that for the majority of our children, they are receiving the money they should be receiving, and our foster carers actually, on the whole, as children are coming up to 14, 15, 16, just like all of us as good parents, are really skilled at supporting children think about budgeting. And absolutely, Councillor Kirby, good question around working. It's no different. Our children are our children, and if they want to get jobs, obviously education is key, so we would always put that first. But of course, absolutely, our children can work just the same as anybody really. So lots of work really to support financial management, budgeting, as we all would as good parents as children transition into adulthood, but really good plans to support our foster carers, our fostering service, to make sure we've got a good eye to all of these things. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Matthew, I'm just about to bring you back in. It sounds as though we're moving in the right direction with this, doesn't it? Although I think that we do have some work to do, as Councillor Lugg points out, so that we get a greater consistency across our foster parents, so that they not that they don't want to do this work, but clearly they need to know the expectations for them and what the norm is, so that they're clearer and that our children have a better idea. I think we would all agree that it's really important that all of our young people in care or otherwise have a better idea of financial management. It's almost more important now than it ever has been. Matthew, do carry on.
Thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to add, we also need to make use of some of the other agencies that we're working with. For example, Share Fund, they're a great resource in terms of what savings we can use. So, for our young people, and making sure that we're reviewing those regularly in child and care reviews. And Sarah Jane and Councillor Well, you've mirrored everything else that I wanted to say. So thank you.
Thanks very much. So we've got Simon now, have we?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, Simon, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm just going to sort of, Matt and I are kind of presenting two parts of the same coin, I would suggest here, so that it's quite helpful to sort of see the two papers or the two parts in conjunction with one another. So what I'm just going to set out to you, what's set out in the paper is in much more detail I'm going to give now, but you've got a little bit of an overview of the current financial provision that we make for care leavers. And what I'm really asking for is for Corporate Parenting Board to support the development of a financial support framework for care leavers. So again, in much more detail. So the paper sets out the range of financial support that we currently provide through the care leaver budget, and the kind of things that we support are access to housing, rent deposit, being able to live independently, including a setting up home fund and some money towards that, being able to get started in life once you leave foster care or whatever placement you are in. We also provide some financial support that can access learning and training, and that might also include a bursary for going to university. We've been relatively generous in our support to students, young people going in, leaving care and going off to university, and as a result, we think we've done relatively well in this area. We've got 39 in the current cohort currently at university. We will also fund things like documentation and identity, so things like passport and driving licence, etc., if that's needed, although hopefully that they do arrive in the Leaving Care Service with those things already in place. In some cases, we need to support our care leavers around their pregnancy and maternity and provide the right clothes, etc. We will also provide some financial assistance around keeping in touch, allowing care leavers to be able to travel home and stay in touch with family members, access to rail passes, etc. And also it is necessary for us from time to time to provide emergency financial assistance, so being able to buy a small shop or take a young person to the supermarket and be able to access that, and also to be able to transfer small amounts of cash, typically around £15, in order to tide a young person over until their next other source of income comes through. What I want to set up to make clear is the kind of current context that we're in. So at the moment, this financial support is done on a case-by-case basis, and it doesn't sit clear within a clearly defined framework which sets out what the entitlements are. It's largely dealt with upon individual requests, and we make every effort, and we try very, very hard to be fair and consistent with that. But without a framework, it is difficult for us to be very clear that we could say we have been entirely equitable with all of our 250 plus care leavers. So the framework is a very useful way for doing this, because it sets out to care leavers themselves and sets out a clear framework for everybody concerned that what the financial support that they are entitled to is. In addition to the direct financial support that we provide, there is a number of other things that we might do which assist with care leavers and their financial circumstances. So we would provide support and to access universal credit, and support young people in attending Job Centre Plus in order to register and make sure that those things are done. We will also look for grants and bursaries that they might be entitled to, particularly those attending university, but there are other areas where that might be the case. We would also try and help young people to access work experience or voluntary work, particularly if that's going to increase their likelihoods of being employable. There are schemes through Dorset Chamber of Commerce to access a business mentor. The Rees Foundation is a national foundation that will fund driving lessons for care leavers. So we will support young people in putting applications to that in order to pay for their driving lessons. And there is also a survival kit which they receive from the LAC nurses on and around their 18th birthday, which is a sort of a package bundle that they can have access to when they move into their accommodation for the first time. And then just to sort of set out where we're going, we've undertaken quite a significant amount of work to set out what we think the framework should look like. There's still some more detailed work to do on that in terms of looking at the costings of that and how that fits with previous expenditure. But the focus of that framework is likely to include access to housing and setting up home. It's likely to include a focus on employment, education and training, including support for apprenticeships. It will still retain an element of emergency financial assistance, but we'd like to think about this slightly differently. And we would like some consideration of personal budgets, which I think is kind of built into the framework. So that gives you a bit of an overview of the paperwork. I'm happy to take some questions. And my apologies that the dogs are getting very excited.
That's quite all right, Simon. Teresa, did you want to come in there and say something?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Weller. I was just meeting with Simon and Kirsten, who's one of the team leaders in the care leavers service. The amount of work that they've been rapidly undertaking to make sure that we've got the right offer, the right local offer for our care leavers in terms of their financial stability and their options around other things is astronomical, as I've said in the chat bar. It's not yet complete. It will be, and when it is, it will be fully published. The most important thing is to get consistency and fairness. It hasn't always been consistent. We've had some, it's too often been dependent upon the value of the relationship that they have with their workers, and that's not okay. And to also then make sure that people know about it and understand it. So really reassuring members of this panel that the work is really underway. We wanted to just not wait because it had been a rightly raised issue here. So wanted to bring it before it was complete, but know that And if there's anybody who wants to have more of a hand in that, I know Simon would be really happy to welcome any members who wanted to kind of be part of finally shaping that.
Thank you very much. Yes, I would appreciate a talk with you, Simon, at some time about that when you have the time. I've got Councillor Jones wants to speak.
Yeah, I just want to say I thought this is brilliant, the work that's going on here for the care leavers. And do all care leavers know precisely what is on offer for them, or is it just ad hoc really from when you talk to them?
I think you've kind of got to the heart of the matter there, Councillor Jones. The challenge at the moment is that we really respond to individual requests. We do, when we know somebody is moving into independent accommodation, a flat or some sort of accommodation, we will provide them with a grant to buy some furniture, to buy whatever they might need in order to get set up. So that bit I would suggest is fairly consistent, but beyond that it tends to be individual requests. The young person is considering taking a particular course of action. They want to access a particular training course, or they want to access an apprenticeship, or they need a deposit because they're moving from where they were originally, and now they're looking to go into a shared flat with somebody, and so we will then consider that individual request and make a judgment accordingly. And I think it's part of it, and if I'm being really honest, has been around expediency. So we obviously have a budget in order to do that, and we've been certainly my predecessors, I've only been in this role for a number of months, but my predecessors have been relatively successful at managing that budget and being able to be on budget at a time of particular financial pressure for the council. But equally, we need to marry that up with what do we feel is our responsibility to our care leavers, and being fair and equitable in dispensing that. And so that's the kind of challenge, and that's why the work is so detailed, because it's not an easy thing to solve.
Are you aware of a lot of local charities which are specific for young people? I know there's some in Dorchester, and I'm sure there are elsewhere.
I'm going to be really honest and say I'm not, but I would be relatively confident that the care leaving team and the team manager would be fairly well versed in those. But if you are aware of specifics and you want to be sure, please do share that with me. I'd gladly pass it on.
I will do. Yeah, thank you.
Right, Sarah Jane, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Just really on the back of what Councillor Jones has just said, the strength of the local offer for care leavers is all of us together, really, as corporate parents. So whilst the team are absolutely, as Teresa says, working flat out as a team and with our care leavers to get this right, as corporate parents, we need to reach out and reach into all of you to really think about what do you know in your communities, what do you know in your businesses, what do you know just in your social groups, that could really be people who can wrap around our care leavers and support them. And that's the real beauty of this local offer. And when you see it work very well in local areas, it's just because of that. So we will be absolutely in conversations with everybody. I'm really keen to hear your ideas as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, Teresa, you wanted to come back in? Teresa?
I just wanted, yes, thank you, Councillor. Well, I wanted to invite Mark Blackman just to talk a little bit about the work opportunities that we're looking at for our care leavers too. So Mark's joined us now.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Teresa. And really it was just to highlight that we view Dorset Council as the family firm. And very much what we want to do is to make as many opportunities available to our young people, either apprenticeships or paid roles on other salary grades, as far as we possibly can, but also to be doing that across the wider estate, if you like, as Dorset, as a place for our young people to work and to grow their careers into the future. So we're undertaking, if you like, advice and guidance and help to those that were looking for apprenticeships as part of our care leavers packages, but also working with employers and working with ourselves as an employer to encourage young people to take up spaces as much as we possibly can within the family firm or within the family estate.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Simon, did you want to come back in?
Just very briefly to add to what Mark's just said. So we are in the process of trying to develop an outline role of a care leaver that can be employed within the care leaving team to support our work as an apprentice. We're just getting to the detail of that, and that will be housed within what we've done with the recent restructure of children's services. Is we've had an increase in the number of personal advisors within the team, and that's allowed us to strengthen. We've got a team within a team that really focuses on employment, education and training, and so we've added additional capacity into that to really put a really strong focus on education, employment and training.
Lovely, thank you. I note your comment there, Teresa. I'm not going to bring you back in now. I'm just going to say welcome to CJ, who's just joined us. So that's terrific to have you here with us, CJ. And I'm very, very mindful of the time. I think we should move on unless somebody is desperate to say anything else. We have to note the recommendations of that report. I think that we've done that. It looks very encouraging. I would welcome, or I would invite all of you to have conversations. I'm sure you'll look forward to it, Simon. Conversations with any of us who would like to take a stronger part in that, and Sarah Jane too. So can we move on to item 7, which is the Action for Children update? And I'm aware that we're now 15 minutes behind time, so entirely my fault, and I apologise. And that's Lynn, I think, isn't it, Lynn?
That's right. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'm the Children's Services Manager for Action for Children, and I look after a number of services across Dorset. The service I'm talking about today, which is the Dorset Advocacy and Independent Visitors Service, and the sister service, which is commissioned by BCP Council. But we've also got some pan-Dorset services I'll just briefly mention because they are accessed by children in care and care leavers in Dorset. So, for example, we do have a young person's mentoring scheme, which is funded by the Police and Crime Commissioner. We've got Dorset Night Stop, which is for homeless young people or at risk of homelessness, which we fund ourselves through fundraising. And we've got an arts-based project for children in care across Dorset, which is funded by BBC Children in Need. So I just thought I'd mention that as well. But today I want to talk briefly to you about our Advocacy and Independent Visitors Service. It is one service, but it has got two distinct elements. Thank you to Karen, who's very kindly sharing her screen because I was having problems with Teams. So hopefully you can see the report up on your screens now. So I'll just pull out some highlights really for you. So in terms of advocacy, which is the first part of the report, this is a project which is for, well, as you will see in the text, it's for children in a wide range of situations. But of interest for this group will be that 49% of those who take it up are either in care or are care leavers. And the services it provides one-to-one support for children to make sure that their voice is heard when decisions are being made, or if they want to make a complaint from a team of trained advocates. There's some stats there for you to look at, which are split into the 3 years that we've been running the service. Year 3 brings you up to date, so it brings you up to the end of September, so it's not a full year. But I hope you can see that we're quite proud we've made some substantial growth across those 3 years in terms of growing our reach and growing the service, which is thanks to work we've done with colleagues in Dorset Council, especially Karen and her team, where we've worked hard to improve access to advocacy. So yeah, monthly average has gone up nearly 100% from year 1. And you will see that there's a difference between, for example, the individual young people we support the episodes of advocacy and the referrals, because children and young people can come back for more than one episode per year. So some young people use the service more than once, and those episodes can last for a few weeks or a few months. If you could scroll down, please, Karen, thank you. Just to look at those stats, and happy to answer any questions on them. And I'll talk a little bit more about the children living outside of Dorset in a moment. But right at the bottom, also quite proud of the fact that we've brought in to this service just over £55,000 through our national and our local fundraising activities to support the service. Thanks, Karen. If you could scroll on down, please. So, top issues. So, at the end of a piece of advocacy, the advocates will tag the issues that have come up during the episode of advocacy. Now, I'm not sure how useful those are going to be, because they are quite general, so I'm not sure how useful they'll be to you. But in terms of contact with family, that will probably be children in care mostly, but it could encompass a whole range of things around contact. So it can be frequency of contact with birth family, where it takes place, when it takes place, who it takes place with. So quite a range of issues within that, really. So I'm sorry there's not perhaps more detail for you. Home life, I would think that is predominantly those in the child protection arena, for obvious reasons around what's happening at home, but maybe some children in care issues within that as well. So those were the top two issues. In terms of children living outside Dorset, obviously we've heard that everybody would prefer them to be living inside Dorset, but whilst they're not, I think it's really important that they have an independent person who can help champion their voice if they need it. And we have gone far and wide to meet with those young people physically, pre-COVID, and more recently virtually, but we are keeping in touch with them as much as possible. Moving on down, so in terms of how well we did, we ask all young people who have had a service from us to complete a simple online survey, and that just asks them how it was for them. There's a prize draw to encourage young people to complete that, and I think completion rates is probably around about, I think it's about 40% at the moment, so not as good as we'd hope, but we're working on trying to improve that. And just some comments there and some stats around how young people felt about the service. And just at the bottom of that page, Karen, is obviously satisfaction rate, which is 4.6 out of 5, which obviously, again, we're quite pleased about. So moving on down to the independent visitors service. So the key difference between the independent visitor service and the advocacy service is that this service is actually offered through recruited, screened and trained volunteers. And I know some of you on the call will know quite a bit about this service. Those volunteers are matched exclusively with children in care. So this service is for children in care. The idea is that it's a long-term match, and it really, someone described it, one of the young people described it as like the auntie I never had, which I thought was quite a good description, but it's around meeting regularly and doing positive activities, having some fun, and also looking at how to support young people as they move on through life and achieve some of their goals. So again, looking at the graph, we have made some growth. So glad to see that line is going up. And overall, we've had 40 young people have used the service since the start of the service. At the moment, we've got, I think it's about 23, but hopefully we are improving on those numbers. Now that is, you'll probably think that is quite a small number, and it is, but looking nationally, we've compared that with the national rate, and the national average for children in care who've got an independent visitor is 3.5%, and we're up to 4.6. So we are doing slightly better. We are supporting young people who are placed out of county with an independent visitor. That is a challenge for us. Again, it's perhaps going to become easier now we're working in a more blended way with more virtual and face-to-face work. But in terms of finding volunteers who are able to travel distances and support young people, it is a problem which is shared again nationally with lots of IV services. So scrolling on down, we review the service with young people, their carers, and I think that comment on the bottom left, which is from a social worker, which says it's definitely having a positive influence on him and it's helped him to settle into his placement, seeing someone he knows regularly. And I think that really sums up in some ways what the service is hoping to achieve. So with the best will in the world, social workers change, foster carers change, living situations change. But the idea is the IV remains with that young person throughout as a consistent, positive adult role model. That's what we're trying to achieve. As well as speaking, thanks, yes, if you could scroll down, thank you. As well as speaking to the foster carers and social workers, we obviously review the service with young people, and those are the sorts of things we ask them about in terms of the difference it makes to their lives. But obviously a key part of that is having someone just to have a chat with and just to go out and have a bit of fun with, as well as achieving some of those outcomes. Excuse me. And in terms of comments from young people, there's a few there that you can read, and I particularly like everyone should have a Jerry. I really like that comment. So at the bottom, in fact, I've included a couple of links in this report, but at the bottom there is a link. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to look at any of those links, but don't click on it now. But it takes you to a piece, a double-page spread we had in the Daily Mirror last year, which is a piece on Match, a Dorset young person, their IV. And it's lovely, and it really brings to life what the service can offer to young people. So if you haven't had a chance to look at it, please, yeah, check it out. And at the beginning of the report, there's also a link to young people talking about what an advocate is and what it means to them. And again, they do it way more eloquently than I can. So please do have a look at that. So finally, after that whistle-stop tour, there's just some information there about how we managed during COVID and the lockdown, and we were pleased that we did manage to keep going. The advocacy service was busier than ever, and we saw it grow 100% during lockdown, which was a challenge for us. But yeah, we did manage to keep going and have capacity to deal with all of those referrals. The IVs, the volunteer IVs, were amazing. They used all sorts of creative ways to engage with young people. So they had cooking, they were cooking together online, they were doing arts and crafts online, the IVs were sending knitting patterns and wool, and they were knitting together, all sorts of amazing things to keep those relationships going. So finally, in terms of our achievements and challenges, I think I've listed a lot of our achievements, so I won't go into too much detail about that. But I guess a challenge for us is how we can now maintain our current reach on the existing resources, especially because obviously during the life of this contract, we have lost some funding through local government reorganisation. So we lost some funding, and as with all charities, it's going to be difficult in our current economic climate to achieve the fundraising at the levels we have done before. So we're very aware of that. So it will be a challenge to maintain that reach. We've got ideas to do that, and we're talking to our colleagues in Dorset about how we can do that using some new apps and things like that. But yeah, that's the end of the report. I'm very happy to take some questions, and apologies if I rattled through that, but I'm conscious of the time.
Thank you very much indeed, Lynn. I seem to have an echo on me now, so I hope you can hear me. That was excellent, and I apologise that I was putting you under time pressure there. I've got Claire Shields wants to speak, and then Councillor Stella Jones. So Claire first.
Lovely, thank you, Councillor Weller, and thank you, Lynn, for that really thorough report. It's really helpful to see. And a couple of things I just wanted to pick up on. It's really important to us that our children, young people have access to advocates when they need them, to make sure their voices are heard. And it's also really important to us that we're doing work around ensuring that we are as child friendly as possible that we can be in all the things that we do. So making sure that our child protection conferences and our children and care reviews are as helpful as they can be, so that children feel they can be part of those and advocate for themselves. So there's a conversation around self-advocacy and making sure we're as welcome and as friendly as we can be, as well as making sure people have access to that independent advice and support when they need it. And we really welcome working with Lynn around some of those conversations and some of that thinking around moving that forward. I think really helpful for us to think around how we prioritise within the existing financial envelope, and we welcome the use of some of the apps and technology to move that forward. So we hear what you're saying around making sure we can maintain that good reach and making sure the right children are having the advocacy that they need. I think we are also ambitious around independent visiting and thinking about what can we do to get more of that available, and how could we collectively identify more people that could do that, but also help our children and young people know that that service is there and available to them. So some real good messages really for us in terms of taking it forward, and the team works really closely with Lynn and Action for Children. Will continue to do so as we move forward.
Thanks, Claire. Stella.
Yeah, I'd like to emphasise the importance of independent visitors. I used to be an independent visitor, and it really is worthwhile. You are the only person who turns up without a notepad. You're not there to assess them for anything. You're there just to have fun with them and talk to them and chat with them and give them something where they can relax without thinking, am I saying the right thing? You just really enjoy yourselves. And I'd encourage anybody out there to actually think about doing it, because it is satisfying for the volunteer as well as for the young child. And I'm sure if there was more funding, we'd have more of them. But young people do really enjoy having this person in their life who really is just there to have fun and chat with.
Thank you very much. As Teresa has said, that's a great summary, and it is a huge advert for what you're doing, I think. So that's really good. I don't have anyone else up to speak. So Lynn, my apologies once again for keeping you waiting so long, but that was terrific. Thank you. And it would be good to keep a follow-up on that service, because I think it's hugely important. Can I just ask, an independent visitor, presumably they become quite friends with the young people that they're, so, you know, there isn't a cut-off at 25, I'm no longer your surrogate auntie or grandma or whatever it is. They remain with some sort of contact, do they?
That's a very good question, Chair, and it is something we've been discussing with Dorset for a while now, because officially the independent visitor finishes at aged 18. However, that's in its formal sense through our contract, but we are aware that many of our independent visitors do keep contact with those young people, albeit text, postcards, birthday cards, that kind of thing. So they do stay in touch, but yeah, we would love to extend it to officially to 25 if and when any funding should become available. And as I said before, as a charity, we're always looking for funding to support. So, you know, we're looking for those funding opportunities as well. But so far, yeah, we haven't had any luck, unfortunately.
Right. Okay. There's a note in there about funding. I'm not sure, Councillor Taylor, whether that's for the advocacy service as well as to Simon Praise Brown, but I'm going to move on in any event to item 8, which is key data overview. And Matthew, that's you again, please.
Hi, thank you, Councillor Weller. I know that you've already received a data pack, so I just wanted to really focus you in on things that we know that we need to improve on, and then also some of the things that we're really proud of and will continue to develop. So just starting with the number of children we have in care, as Teresa Levy has said earlier, we know that we have about 100 children that are in care, possibly too many. We're looking at in September 11 children coming into care, which has been quite consistent over the months. However, that includes some of our unaccompanied asylum seekers. And I can honestly say, with the improved measures we have around line of sight, our permanency tracker meetings, and our panels where we're looking to issue, there's a lot more scrutiny on all of that, and I honestly feel we're moving in the right direction, and I can feel it building momentum. One of the other areas that we need to improve on, and you would have seen it in your data pack, is around our initial health assessments, and also to some extent around our review health assessments. Now, with regard to the initial health assessment, we have had some issues with medical consents and the timeliness of health receiving them. We've also had some issues with them being sent back from health and leading to delay, especially when it relates to unaccompanied asylum seekers. But we're working on that, and we have ongoing meetings with them to look at developing our pathways to make sure that there's not a delay in getting those completed. In terms of the review health assessments, there is also, again, some inconsistencies in our data, and we're again working with them to fully understand in real time what actually that means. And I know that that's an issue for other local authorities just over our border when we're looking at, in particular, review health assessments. So, for example, in the data packet was 70%, but actually we feel that, Health are reporting that it's 85.7%. So clearly we need to make sure that our data matches and we're portraying the right information in the in the right way. One of the things that I'm really proud about is that actually we're at 89.8%, as Teresa Levy said. I would round that up to 90% in terms of our permanence. We are working hard to make sure that our children have permanence, and there's always room for improvement. We're holding permanency tracker meetings to ensure that there's less drift and delay, and where there is, there's clear actions for us to get it back on track as soon as possible. We're also exploring all permanence options and improving our planning. So looking at, for example, long-term fostering, reunification, special guardianship orders in a timely way to ensure, that will ultimately have an impact on the number of children that we have in care. I feel the momentum growing with that. And alongside all of that, we're looking at quality through dip sampling, through themed audits around permanence, which is all very positive. Another thing that I just wanted to bring to your attention is the stability of our foster placements. Now, we've worked really hard to move from the term stability meeting to actually support meetings and getting those done earlier rather than later to really ensure that those placements are being held, and we're wrapping around our children, our foster carers, to make sure that we're not having multiple placement moves, which, whilst is good, I'm ambitious. We all should be ambitious for our children, and we really want to just keep that drive going. It was sitting at about 10% in your data pack, but I'd like to see us get to that outstanding where we're 10% and below. The other key point that I wanted to raise was around, it came up in our last corporate parenting formal meeting around missing from care. And I just wanted to give you an update in terms of we're working with police, and we're looking at the police are looking at rolling out a Philomena protocol, which will replace the missing passport that our children are having, which will be key data that will be shared. The difficulties we have at the moment is that when a child goes missing or absent from placement, the police can only record it as a missing episode, which is really skewing our figures because they're not necessarily always missing for a significant period of time. So there's a lot of work being done at the moment around the guidance we're giving to our children in care, our foster carers, for example, and how we work with the police to ensure that we're absolutely logging the right information so we have the right data. I just wanted to make you aware that this work is being done in the background, and hopefully into next year we can have more of an update once the data has been cleaned up in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for Matthew on that? I haven't got anybody in the chat bar. I do have somebody in the chat bar. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, good afternoon to you all. Thank you for that, Sir Matthew. It's quite interesting to hear the reports going on to the Police Commission, because I actually sit on the Police and Crime panel and also Foster Selection Committee. So it'd be nice to actually catch up on this to see how far forward we could go. So could I have some information to send over? I'd like that, please.
Sorry, yes, absolutely, Councillor Weller. I'll send you an email separately if that's okay.
That'd be lovely. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Councillor Taylor. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. That's right.
Okay, that's all right, David. Anybody else want any questions? Councillor Kirby.
Yeah, I think we covered quite a lot of the stuff in the reports earlier in terms of the looking at sadness in our young people, and I think it also came up in the last corporate parenting board. One of the things that always intrigues me, and as no one else wants to speak, is can I just have a look at the ratio of boys to girls in terms of our children in care? Why have we got so many? It looks like to me we've got more boys in care. Why is that? Do people just not like us boys very much? Be interesting to find out why.
It's a really good question.
I'll leave you to pick someone to answer that one.
Possibly comment.
Yeah, if I respond actually, Chair, because I really remember having a very challenging conversation with somebody once when I asked the same question in another place, and they said, "Have you ever looked after 9-year-old boys?" Yes, actually, I have, and they're quite charming. But I guess there are some elements that are distorting it in terms of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. All of our unaccompanied asylum-seeking children are boys, so they're an additionality in the numbers, and that can skew it some ways. But there's also, I think, the issue around if we look at the levels of school challenges. So if you looked at the same, I think, population of our learning centres, Councillor Kirby, you'd probably see the same. You know, sadly, our boys also are too often the ones that are being ejected from our schools, and then that adds extra pressure into families and etc. So yeah, it is. I've committed to campaign on 2 matters all month as part of our national conference of directors of children's services. One is to work more effectively with boys and men, because we still haven't got where we need to get to, and the poor outcomes that are happening for particularly young babies over this COVID period are really concerning. And the second is about co-sleeping. I'll leave the co-sleeping for another place, but not working well enough with our boys and men remains a real target for us.
Yeah, I'd really love some more information in terms of why those young men, I should say, and boys end up in care. I think it's just a bit disconcerting. And then you mentioned it earlier. Sorry, Chair, you're right. If I just continue.
Yes, carry on.
It's just regarding the young asylum seekers that have come across. So they're all young males, are they?
They are presently. Yeah, not always. Very occasionally. I mean, generally across the country, it's probably 90-10, 90%, 10%. You do get some girls, but generally it's males. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a bit worrying. You just wonder what's happening to these young ladies.
Absolutely.
So I suppose looking at it from two different sides, you know, why have I got more young boys in care, and then actually why have we got more young male asylum seekers? Yeah, it's a bit odd. I suppose it's one of those things we just can't do here, can we? There we go.
No, but it is interesting, and it is important, I think, for us to look at how those boys present is sometimes different to the way in which girls present, and it's something that kind of troubles me about how we can respond. And whilst we're well represented with young lovely male managers on this call, I don't have the same representation in my workforce in terms of men and women. More male family workers would be really helpful too. So, when we talk about getting a real reflective workforce, sometimes it's not necessarily the balance that we are looking for in other places. So, I'm really keen to make sure we can also recruit young men to work with our families, because that's really important in terms of building those relationships.
Thanks, Teresa. I think that's reflected in the comment that Jan and Martin have made in in the chat bar as well, the lack of positive male role models that many families have these days. So it's an interesting point, and one that we should explore further, I think, Andrew, but probably not now.
Yeah, I know it's a bit of a rabbit hole, isn't it? But it would be nice if it came back to us in terms of why there are more young
Indeed. And I've scribbled down a note, and I'm sure other people have as
yeah.
well.
And also Miriam's point as well about a high proportion of boys in SEND. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Mark, did you want to make a comment there? I see you put your camera on.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add that the same disparity that we see in social care occurs in teaching as well. And so many of our boys can actually go through their entire school life without a single male role model as a sort of form tutor or a class teacher. And I think that potentially is a bit of a tragedy, actually.
Yes, indeed. I think this is probably it's a sort of a can of worms, isn't it? And not one that I feel we have the time to stir up right now. But it is certainly something that we maybe do need to look at in more depth to see if there are some solutions there. Councillor Holloway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick one. Obviously, yes, Councillor Kirby does make a very interesting point there, I think. And I think that's something possibly I think we should maybe look into a bit further as to why is that. But sorry, yeah, as in regards to my question, Matthew, on page 57 of emotional well-being, where it's about the assessments, I see that obviously over the course of the 6 months that has sort of been going down. That has. I take it. Just to clarify, is that mainly because of COVID restrictions as to why that figure is a bit down?
Sure. Councillor Holloway, Miriam Lee, our lead psychologist, is on the call, and she might be a better place to answer that. We do have a working group around emotional well-being.
I mean, that. Hello, everybody. In terms of that question, Councillor Holloway, I think that's a good question. And at the moment, there is a challenge around completion of our strengths difficulties questionnaires and where it sits. They are part of our 12 monthly health assessment. And in terms of being able to drill down into how come they're dipping, we haven't had that opportunity. I have a meeting arranged with our nursing team, and actually Penny Ernie to sort of look at what's going on around our use of strengths difficulties questionnaires. As I said in the last corporate parenting, our aim is to use them to inform intervention, to use them earlier when a young person comes into the care system, rather than to use them at the point of the 12 monthly assessment. The report you're reading is them being completed at the annual health assessment, and it's possibly because people don't really understand the use of them at that point. But we need to do more intelligent, find out a bit more in terms of intelligence around that. But it's a good question, Councillor Holloway.
Okay, no, thank you for obviously answering that question. Yes, maybe, as you said, we just need to obviously possibly just give some more help and guidance. We do. I can understand, obviously, because of the COVID restrictions, and because of obviously that we're still currently technically in a national lockdown across England. I can understand if those figures perhaps are dipping a little bit because of that. But I am was just a bit concerned, seeing that it has gradually been dipping over the last sort of 6 months. So I just think that we just need to be very wary of that as corporate parents. Thank you.
Indeed, thank you. Councillor Kirby, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, sort of building on Ryan's point, really. Sorry, Councillor Holloway's point regarding. So at the very beginning, the agenda, one of the things that we noted were about care plans and the fact that there's a little bit of inconsistency around them. So my concern is about if we do have a lack of initial assessment, particularly around in terms of health and others, how are we meant to effectively create a proper effective care plan without the knowledge of the medical experts and having that input there? So it's just a bit of a catch-22, and I think just leaves us a little bit open.
Indeed. Anybody want to pick up on that?
Yeah, I'm happy to, Chair. I think that's just really, really helpful. And just listening to that conversation, I think team and all that's on this call, I think we'll set up a very rapid competition to see how many SDQs can be completed using Teams. This doesn't have to be done face to face. This is absolutely a place if we can get some interactive, maybe Anne or advocacy colleagues, Lynn could help us with getting something really fun and buzzy using the SDQ framework, but we get it happening and we get those numbers up, because it's not okay that they've dropped like that. It really isn't. And I actually don't think it's COVID, because actually it is something that could be done online. But it doesn't have to be, you know, for some children it will be a very significant event, but for many others it's a fairly simple, you know, you can make it into Quizzy, you can do a kind of, you know, sensible approach to it. So thank you for the challenge. I think we'll take that one, and we'll look to improve that rapidly by giving it conspicuous care.
I think that's excellent, Teresa. Thank you very much. And in fact, I think a lot of people will agree that now we've become so adept at virtual meetings, they're actually in many ways a better way of doing things, because we're not having to tramp across the country. And for our youngsters, as was said earlier, they can be quite fun. So let's do that. That's absolutely terrific. Thank you. I'm going to move us on now, please, if I may, to item 9. It's you again, Matt, for the Young People's Challenge cards.
Thank you very much. Absolutely. Okay, so in terms of the first challenge, we had a challenge around a transport review and how that affects taxi use. Because of COVID-19 and the pandemic, this hasn't progressed in the way that we would like. I've touched base with the transport team, childcare team in particular, and they're saying that they would like, as they get online more, to have the review and feedback to the board in the early part of next year. They did suggest January, if our agenda permits. So I just wanted to give that as an update. It is on our agenda. It just has been paused slightly because of the pandemic. Would you like me to go through individual ones, or should I take questions as I go?
Can you? I'm sorry to do this to you, Matt, but if you could rattle through fairly quickly,
okay.
And if people can make a note and then come back with their questions afterwards, I think that's probably the best way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of challenge 2, this was around identity cards for social workers. I know that they were issued, and then we went into a lockdown. And I know feedback from our young people and our social workers is that they're not being consistently used. So from our end, we'll be picking that up and reminding our social workers to carry the cards with them, and that can go out fairly quickly in terms of communication, reminding our staff to use that. In terms of point 3, it was felt that our foster care training needed a bit of a revamp, and we have myself and John Heron, who is now in fostering as the fostering lead manager, will be working with participation people as well as Click around co-producing some of our training and what we can do differently. And that meeting's being set up for the end of November, beginning of December. It may have already been set up. It's just I've been on annual leave the last 2 weeks, so I'm hoping that'll be from into late November, December, as I said. So that covers off that one. There was a challenge 4 around access to records, or young people accessing their records. This is now in place, and we've encouraged through participation people for our young people to test and see if it works. We haven't to date had anyone try it, so let's wait and see on that. In terms of point 5, there was an issue around problems at school. They felt that communication between school and social care wasn't good enough or fast enough. What can be done to address this? Now, when I took this up, I think this is a little bit out of date, because actually it was felt that we did have good communication, but it was more about the young person having a different perspective of an incident that's happened or occurred between school and social work. So my challenge would be for any further detail, or it might be that we can take this off because the feedback we have is that we've got good links with school and do have good communication. Going on to point 6, the use of delegated powers in foster carers. Just to make clear, our foster carers do have delegated authority and should have. We've had a consistent drive within fostering and also our operational social work teams to ensure that they have and are aware of what they can and can't do under the delegated authority. And so whilst this is a work, progress in there's progress in this regard. There's always room for improvement, but I would say that there's been significant improvement in this regard. So I'm hoping, unless I hear otherwise, this has been a positive piece of work and no longer an issue. There was on point 7, children and young people in care have told us that sometimes they need to speak to a social worker privately. Absolutely, we agree with you, and that should be happening. I'm being told that would happen, and again through audits and observations practice, we should be seeing that happening. And again, we'll remind staff of the need to see children on a one-to-one basis away from foster carers. Okay, and then in terms of point 8. There was people are struggling to understand job titles. What we are using, and has come up in this meeting earlier, we are starting to use one-page profile. A large majority of our staff are completing one-page profiles, and what we need to get better at is making sure we're consistently using them in child and care reviews, in PEPs, for example, so that it becomes standard practice. We're almost there, but again, a little bit more work in terms of getting that up and running. And what would also be handy once that's established is then to start getting our children and young people completing their own one-page profiles as well. Sorry, I'm not monitoring the chat bar. Please stop me, Councillor Weller, if there's anything that jumps out.
I could bring them all in at the end. There isn't
Brilliant.
any at the moment.
Brilliant. In terms of point 9, that children in foster placements wanted to be treated as part of the family, and it was hurtful about children going into having to go into respite care when they go on holiday. This is an ongoing piece of work, and the update that we had was around the use of terminology and planning. Sometimes there is need for a break for everybody involved, but absolutely it's the terminology is being used and how we can support our children to understand that where appropriate. There was point 10, care leavers saying about feeling ill-equipped to manage money and budget effectively. And again, we need to look at how our foster carers and our social workers are working with our children in preparation for adulthood and making use of partner organisation, participation people, for example, are doing work around budgeting. We've got Share Fund as well that offer guidance and advice, all of which we should be pulling on to support our young people with their budgeting. Point 11 was around what's the best way for our children in care and care leavers to tell us about their experiences in care. And that was to do with training. What's it like to be a child in care, which I personally attended. I'm hoping most of you attended. It was a really powerful training course. It was done incredibly well, albeit online. And the feedback so far has been very positive. So that's great to hear. And there'll obviously be continued drive from our senior management team to ensure that our staff are attending that for the reasons I've just outlined. Point 12 is about activity days and corporate parents being involved. Now, there's been a little bit of a pause just because of the lockdown and the current pandemic. But again, we're hoping once we're out of lockdown and we are able to meet face to face, I would love to attend, and I'm sure most of us would, some of those really positive activity days our young people have been involved in. There was point 13, and this was about having one contact with health concerns. Now, I know that the health are in consultation with participation people, and there's further consultation through participation people with our young children and young people, and that's going to be gaining more momentum into the first quarter of this year. What I didn't mention earlier, sorry, is that we have agreement as well that the health assessments, initial and review health assessments, will remain a priority despite us being in lockdown. Those staff won't be redeployed. I should have mentioned that earlier. And then lastly on my list, no, not lastly, sorry, I've got a few more. There was a reference to PEP money being used for hobbies and interests. And again, we need to make sure that we're picking this up in child and care reviews, and that the QAROs are challenging and asking the questions and making sure that our social workers, our children in care are aware of what they can access and how they can access that money. Point 15, and we're almost there. There was a feeling that younger children had more support for mental health than older children. Now, as we've previously mentioned, there's a working group around emotional well-being. We're working close with our health colleagues to ensure that it's not only CAMHS offering support, but also through education and college provision, as well as making use of our emotional well-being practitioners and ensuring that our children in care have an absolute priority and pathway through to CAMHS. And then the last point was around care leavers and feeling that they needed one-to-one time with their PAs. And I'm reassured by talking with the team managers and some of their staff that that is absolutely happening. And what I would say is we will continually be reminding our staff, in particular our PAs, the importance of those one-to-ones, having a coffee. It's not just about having meetings and meetings and meetings. These are our children, and it's so important to build those relationships. I know I've rushed through that. I hope that was okay, Councillor Weller.
That's good, thank you. I don't have anybody up on my list yet. I was going to make a comment on, I've got an RTS here, but no name on it at the moment. Just a minute, sorry, it'll come up in a second, I'm sure. Oh, Councillor Lugg, I think that is. Councillor Lugg, you wanting to speak?
Yeah, it's just a comment. So this is a report about corporate parenting challenge cards. So it's about the challenges young people have set. But did we have to use such corporate language in the answers? I'm looking at it and I'm thinking the work resumed in September from both a children's service and place perspective and is aligned with the corporate transformation plan with additional drivers. What on earth does that mean to a young person?
Sure, absolutely agree, Councillor Lugg. I left that in because I've inherited this and I didn't want to make dramatic changes, but there will be changes moving forward. This is just for transparency. I've kept it and then tried to update it. So
I didn't think it was your language, Matt, but I'm just thinking about CJ, who's saying about job titles. I'm just wondering what she's thinking when she's reading this.
Sure,
so
absolutely.
Yeah, that would be great if we could have it in more young person friendly language.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I think a discussion with CJ on that would probably help quite a bit, Matt, as well. And I was certainly very concerned on the item about using the word respite, which is a very user unfriendly term, I think, and anything we can do around that would be very useful, I think. So again, I think that that's a conversation that perhaps CJ, we haven't even heard from you today, and I apologise for that, but perhaps you and I could have a chat sometime around that, because I think you will have some views that will be very useful to us. Sarah Jane, I've got you down as wanting to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I think probably you've just summed it up really well, what I was going to say, but absolutely we'll take it away to make sure that the actions coming back are presented in a way that are really helpful for all of us, and we'll work with participation people to make sure it works for them as well, most importantly. So thank you for that. We'll do that.
Can I just say I was fortunate enough to go on some of the events with our foster children and foster carers a couple of years ago when we were still Dorset County, and I do recommend them to anyone. They're huge fun, and it's a great opportunity to meet with our young people and to meet and have a chat with the carers to see the problems that they face and the wonderful ways in which they deal with them. They're certainly well worth doing, I think, because the carers to chat to each other and get to know each other as well is a jolly useful a useful thing to do, I think. We've had lots of useful comments there, but no other questions, Matt. So we can move on again. We're hopelessly out of time now, so I think I'm about to give up, and I do apologise. Urgent items. I'm sorry. I'm reading a. I'm sorry. I was reading a note from CJ there, and I'll catch up with you in a few minutes, CJ, if I may. Urgent items, Matt. Do you want to? Is there anything that we need to say?
Sorry, it was just point 10, just really quickly. Sorry, on the agenda item, items brought forward, which is absolutely fine. Just to consider the proposed change in this board meeting, we were considering moving it to 5 to 7 to allow our young people to attend, just because of the college and school issues that they were having and attending. And I wanted to just highlight that first off. And then the second was around membership, and what I felt was we didn't have representation from our police colleagues or from a head teacher, which might be really, well, it could be a really good thing moving forward as a board. But again, I just wanted to raise it and see where we stood with that.
Both of those suggestions I think are good. Any comments? Any comments from anybody who's still managed to stay the pace on that additional membership and the changing of times? Would that be terribly difficult for people if we made our meetings a little later so that our young people could join us? CJ, not surprisingly, is happy with the suggestions. Anybody else? Can we undertake to drop me and Matt a line on this so that we can come up with something for the future? And going back to what Richard Biggs, Councillor Biggs, was saying right at the very start, in terms of getting reports to us in a more timely fashion, I think we need to look at the timings of our meetings so that, you know, when we know that a report is due at a particular time, that we have a meeting very close to that time so that we can consider the report when it's still fresh in our minds. I'm very aware that we've got the annual fostering report not coming us until January, when we will almost be ready for another annual fostering report. So I think that that's something that perhaps Sarah Jane, Matthew and Teresa, we could look at to make sure that our meetings are at more appropriate times. Yeah, we're getting lots of support coming through in the chat line for those changes. So we'll work around those and we'll get back to you all if that's okay. We don't have any urgent items, do we, Matt?
No,
No.
Councillor Weller, no.
Right. Item 12 you'll see on your agenda. For those of you who don't speak council speak, the point of this of number 12 is that item 13 is what's known as an exempt item. That means that it can't be held in public, and that means that I need to close this part of the meeting invite all members of the council to remain, but our guests, etc., must leave. Committee services and our democratic services and our technical support will deal with you all leaving the meeting. Those of you who are not part of the meeting will be able to leave, and the rest of us will remain. Before we finally go, I've got CJ would just like to speak very quickly. So if you could hang on just one moment, CJ.
One check, you guys can hear me.
Yes, there we go. Lovely. We can hear and see you. Thank you.
You know, you were saying about meeting up outside of this. How would we go about doing that?
Well, we can either do that virtually, CJ. When we're allowed to go out again, we could do it in reality, and that would be lovely. Can I, through Matt, get in touch with you outside the meeting, and we can get something sorted out? I can be pretty flexible, so I can be available when you're available. Okay?
Okay.
Would that be okay?
Yeah, that'll be okay. Thank you.
Be in touch with you really soon. Okay?
Yeah.
Thanks very much indeed for coming along today. It was great to have you there because it's useful for you to know what we're up to, and then you're in a position then to tell me what we ought to be doing and what we ought not to be doing. Okay? Really value your thoughts on that. Oh, apparently we're all going to Nando's. I've never been to a Nando's, so that shows how old I am, doesn't it? That's an experience for me, CJ. Who's paying? Actually, nobody said who's paying. Oh,
Councillor
okay.
Weller, we'll let you graduate.
Councillor Kirby's paying, apparently.
That's right, exactly. And when he's taken you there, then we'll let you graduate to a spoons for breakfast. That's the real living.
Chairman, I think we probably are still live at the moment. Can we formally propose and second to move into its own business, and then we can sort out who needs to be in the space?
Right. Thanks very much, Kate. Okay. Can we will close this meeting now. I'm terribly sorry that it's so late. We'll close this meeting now, and we'll see you all in a couple of minutes. Those of you who will be remaining in the meeting. Okay. Thank you.
I'll second that.